So welcome back to Fatal Female Friday. In today's case, we're going to be doing the case of Clementine Barnabet, which is also known as the voodoo murders back in Louisiana, like the early 1900s. So, of course, last week's case was somewhat modern, and so we're going to have to go back in time, like in the early 1900s. So yeah, let's just go ahead and get started. Clementine was said to be born sometime in 1894 in St. Martinsville, Louisiana, which by the case, the majority of this video will take place in Louisiana. So just keep that in mind. Her parents were Raymond Barnabet, which is obviously where she got her last name, and Nina Porter. They obviously were married at one point. And then Raymond, who is Clementine's father, apparently had several mistresses, and apparently he was abusive. It's not exactly confirmed whether or not Raymond actually was abusive to Clementine and her brother Zephyrin, which he'll come into the story later, so remember that name also. However, apparently it was confirmed that he was, in fact, abusive to his wife. And so, when Clementine was, like, in her early teenage years, she had moved to, like, a poor side of town in Lafayette, Louisiana. After shortly moving to Lafayette, Louisiana, this is where they get involved in this church called the Church of Sacrifice, which is where they are told that they can get anything they want, anything they could possibly ask for, as long as you can perform a human sacrifice.
No ma'am. No ma'am. No ma'am. No ma'am.
The first suspected murder of this series, which, by the way, this is a serial killer case, so I guess keep that in mind also. The first suspected case was back in 1909 in Rayne, Louisiana, and it was Edna Opolis, I'll put it down below, and her 3 children, and so they all were killed by an axe.
Damn!
And so yeah, apparently not much is known about that case, unfortunately. 2 years later, on February 11th, 1911, in Crowley, Louisiana, this is the first, like, confirmed murder of Clementine, if that makes sense. Walter Byers and his family would obviously, unfortunately, all be murdered, of course, also by an axe. It's believed that the killer actually came in through a window, since the back door, like, the doors were locked, so that seemed the only way possible to get in. Unfortunately, they were also in, like, this really poor part of town that just so happened to be a black family, and so it seemed to investigators that the killer was black.
2 weeks later.
2 weeks after that murder, there was a woman named Nina Martin, so not Nina as in Clementine's mother, but there's another Nina. So Nina Martin, this is still in Lafayette, Louisiana. She wakes up to the sound of the rooster like 7 a.m., which apparently that's normal for her, and she was about to start like her normal morning routine with like her son like bust in the house. I didn't find an age or how old the son is, but when I seen it said he was young, so I'm thinking like elementary school-ish, and so he busted in the house and was like, hey, your sister, which I guess is his aunt, and her husband, so I guess like his uncle-in-law, they're all dead. They've been murdered. And so she's like, what? And so she runs over across the street, because apparently they all live across the street, to see if this is true or not. And sure enough, she finds her sister, her husband, and their 2 children all murdered in a single bed. On March 11th in Beaumont, Texas, so I guess we left Louisiana and just went to Texas for a little bit, Louis Castaway, his wife, and their 3 children would all be found murdered in their home, obviously by an axe. However, there is a little twist with the murders that happened in Texas. The wife was white, and remember this was like the early 1900s, so I guess somehow that was like legal in Texas. So like the rest of the family is black, the wife is white, and this said that it was believed at the time that whoever the killer was, they didn't like the fact that this family was mixed, because again, back then that wasn't as openly acceptable as it is now, obviously, so they believed that was the reason they were killed, was simply because of that. And so the sheriff, whose last name is like Lacoste, he believed that the murders were committed by none other than Raymond Barnabet, which his now basically, I guess, former wife Nina basically said, yeah, he could have been responsible. And so he finds Raymond and like instantly arrests him, which like no proof other than his wife basically saying he could be involved in the murders.
Really, nigga?
It's said that they didn't have enough on him to like legally keep him like behind bars, so they kind of had to let him go.
Several days later.
He is arrested again.
Bruh.
And so the trial obviously took place like sometime in October, and like apparently questions were asked that would have helped the defendant more than had they not been asked. So when you know it, on the prosecution side, they actually had Clementine, her brother Zephyrin, and his former wife Nina.
Oh wow. Oh wow. Oh wow. Oh wow.
And so his own children basically testified against him and talked about how abusive he was and how horrible father he was, and how apparently he came home like late one night and it just happened to be the night of one of the murders, and he had just said that he had killed the whole damn Andrews family. And the Andrews family, that was the family that lived across the street from Nina Martin, the one that walked in on them all dead. Like, so here's where it gets interesting. Nina says that Raymond got on a train like around 7 p.m. the night before one of the murders and was going to Bazard, Louisiana. It's never said if that was actually confirmed or not. And so apparently he didn't get home till like 2 a.m. the next day. And so he was pissed that there was no dinner left for him despite it being like 2 a.m.
Bitch. The door.
And so apparently his mood, because he was already pretty pissed that there was no dinner left for him, had gotten worse after he claims that he had left his smoking pipe. He had lost the pipe, this little smoking pipe. So despite being upset about the no dinner and the smoking pipe, he goes to sleep. And so Clementine, who's like 17 at the time, by the way, who's like 17 at this point in the story, by the way, she basically tells the court, she's like, no, he came home closer to like sunrise than 2 a.m. And so she's like, yeah, that pipe he claimed he lost, he was smoking it in her version of the story. And in her version of the story, she also apparently had blood and brain matter on his shirt, and he had claimed that he had just killed the whole damn Andrews family. So yeah, so that they obviously were frightened, and they helped him clean up the shirt, and he said he deserved the dinner simply because he had simply just went and killed the whole family, and that if they told anyone, they would be next.
I will send you to Jesus.
Raymond allegedly said they deserved it because they weren't following like the rules of God, and his son Zephyr basically said the same thing. Prosecutors were trying to make sure they actually called in like apparently some of the best like black people, at least in their opinion, up to the stand to like try to make like Raymond look bad, to like basically make their version look more credible and have him sentenced guilty for these crimes. The sheriff believed that the siblings knew more than they let on. The all-white jury, which of course is obviously all-white jury, it's the early 1900s, they convicted Raymond guilty of the murders, which, not surprising. Raymond obviously declared like a new trial because apparently he was drunk, and the jury apparently didn't follow the instructions they were given, and the prosecution never showed a motive for these crimes. And so somehow, because of all that, he was granted a new trial, surprisingly. So while Raymond is obviously behind bars, he's waiting for his second trial, there's another family in Lafayette that is killed.
Help me. Help me. Nigga. Help me.
And so, in this case, it is Norbert Randall, his wife, his 3 children, and apparently a nephew that was sleeping over at the time. They all were discovered to have been struck behind the right ear. And so they were all just happened to be discovered by a daughter. So they actually had 4 kids who just happened to not be home at the time. There was an axe that was still at the scene, but it was wiped clean. Whereas in the other cases, the axe was like still there and it was like still bloody. Which, by the way, axes were actually common apparently in households back then. So the killer was using the victim's own axe that they had in their own household. And so apparently the husband had been shot as well, which apparently just the husband. So I don't know why. I guess he had something personal against the husband. And so because of the brutality of like these murders, it was now believed that there's no way one person could just commit this crime. It has to be like a group of people, maybe 2, but definitely more than 1. So the sheriff is also suspicious, and so he goes to like Clementine's house. He gets let in. And so, like, while he's let in, he finds, like, a dress that has blood and brain matter on it.
That's suspicious. That's weird.
One of the doors in the house were actually said to actually have a lot of blood on them, which the sheriff himself saw. And the sheriff obviously is, like, checking around the house, and he actually finds a lot of clothes that have blood on them.
You're so dumb. You are really dumb. For real.
And so obviously, somehow they went to go get tested, which DNA wasn't really like a thing yet. DNA testing wasn't really a thing yet. So, but they somehow had someone who was able to tell the difference between like human blood like whether it was because Clementine had made a claim that that was like her like blood from her menstrual cycle, like from her basically from her period, right?
How, Sway? Take a few steps.
And so somehow they had someone who was able to tell whether or not the blood on these articles of clothing were from her cycle or they were just regular old blood. The sheriff after that somehow was able to arrest Clementine and charge her with murder, but charged her brother as an accessory along with 2 other men. But I couldn't find the other 2 men's names like anywhere, so I don't know whatever happened to them, whether the charges got released or anything. When questioned about the murders, she apparently had laughed about when being asked about the murders, but then claimed she knew nothing. She then went from then claiming that she had a partner when doing the murders to then claiming, oh, I was solo, like it was just me doing it. But she somehow always insisted that her father was never involved, despite when she was at trial, she claimed that her father was the one who was out here killing these families. The brother claimed that he had an alibi, which apparently he legitimately did. And so, unfortunately, until the alibi could be proven, he had to stay in jail. And once the alibi was proven, he was innocent and stuff, he could be let go. And so the chemist came back and was like, yeah, this ain't no period blood. This is blood, you know? And so because of that, the brother was and so soon after that, the brother and the 2 other men were let go. And so the sheriff shockingly discovers there's actually a cult in his town. And he only finds this out thanks to pretty much most, if not all, the victims actually being members of the Church of Sacrifice. Remember, that's that church that I talked about earlier. So now we are in 1912, and we are back in Crowley, Louisiana, and Harriet Crane had an adult daughter who had some kids, and she thought it was weird that there was no outside activity, because, you know, if there's kids, they're going to be running around, you know, outside. So, you know, she thought it was weird, so she went and got some neighbors. So she goes over with like 2 neighbors because, you know, she's not trying to go over there by herself, which, I mean, can you blame her? And then one of the neighbors, which thankfully not her, but one of the neighbors discovers the bodies of 4 different people in a bed. And of course, that's the daughter, the children, and I think the husband. They had actually found an axe with 2 sets of footprints from the night before.
Of 2, count 'em, 2.
Because apparently it had rained the night before. And so, yeah, dogs were actually used to, you know, sniffer dogs were used to, like, go on the trail. But, of course, like, obviously, once the trail was lost, they obviously, like, kind of just stopped. 3 days after that murder happened, another family of 4, which I could not find their names for the life of me, which kind of is frustrating. There was a message written on the wall, which basically was a Bible verse. And the Bible verse apparently was, like, Psalms 9:12, which I will leave for you to read yourself. Apparently, it's also said that there was a thing that said "signed a human 5," so that was also found. Apparently, there was like buckets of blood under the kids' beds that was believed to like catch the blood that came from their bodies. And so when you know it, the reverend of the church that they were attending actually was arrested to see like why was it true that people were actually out in the streets, you know, killing for God. And then so another priest got in question, so I assume it's safe to assume he got arrested too, because it said that they were both later set free, but they both were released after that. The black population of Brioux, Louisiana had stayed up with their weapons ready and everything, not knowing who exactly was going to be next. On February 11th, so still 1912, about 150 people apparently went to a local church to like help try to find out whoever was responsible for these murders. They were even willing to turn over like any information they possibly could give, and then apparently had permission to act like authorities, but only like in certain situations. And so February 20th, so I guess like the following week, still 1912 by the way, back in Beaumont, Texas, apparently there was another family that got killed almost in the same way that the murders that had pretty much been going on. And so Clementine apparently had confessed to like being involved with the Dove family murders that just happened. So I assume it is never said they were the Dove family, but it makes sense that murder just happened. But keep in mind, Clementine is behind bars, so they're thinking to myself like, how could you have done that? Like, how did you escape and then come back? Because most people that escape jail, they don't come back. This is where the story gets interesting. She starts telling about her upbringing in voodoo. And so she claims that she got like this stone from a woman, and that the woman said that if she had the stone with her, she can get away with any crime that she wants. Which so I guess like the stone basically is like a good luck charm, or like get out of jail free card, however you see it. She then started like recalling the murders in gruesome detail, like basically stuff that only the killer or someone who was on the scene at the time around the death would know. Apparently, so remember how I said like the children had gotten killed too? Well, the only reason the kids were getting killed, they didn't have no problem with the kids. It was just the kids. They didn't want the kids to be orphaned, so like the kids had to die too.
Oh my God! Wow!
At least that's how she tried to justify it. And so apparently Norbert Randall, apparently was the brother-in-law of Alexander Andrus, who was the husband of the Andrus family. And both families were members of the Church of Sacrifice.
Coincidence? I think not!
It was believed that the murders in Texas were apparently like a copycat killer and not the group nor Clementine, because again, it's a different state, which it is possible like by train, but like
Ain't nobody got time for that!
that's a lot of traveling you gotta do, so they believe it was a copycat since that those murders were going around like pretty, what we would call viral now. It was going around like fast. And so on April 4th, still 1912, Clementine will be charged with the murders of the Randall family. It's believed that she is responsible for at least up to 35 murders.
Damn!
But obviously all 35 of those murders have not been confirmed. The sheriff goes to arrest Joseph Thibodeau, which, keep in mind, Clementine is the one who said that Thibodeau is the one who gave her like the contrabags, which I remember I said the get out of jail free card. I want to say it's like a little necklace that she had. She said that's the one who sold it to her, and then Thibodeau basically denied that was the reason, that's what it was for, and denied any connection that being involved with voodoo, because people went crazy apparently after she mentioned voodoo. And so Clementine, sure enough, positively identified him. The sheriff started to, of course, not start to believe Clementine, because there were little details in, like every time she was telling the story, there were little details that would change, and like so obviously they weren't adding up, or she would like add stuff that wasn't there like originally, and so things were just not adding up. And so apparently. And so on April 12th, William Barton, his wife, his 2 kids, and apparently like a brother-in-law, I guess the brother-in-law was staying over for some reason, they all ended up getting murdered. What's different about this crime scene, apparently, there were like little sticks that were between like the kids' fingers. The meaning behind like the whole stick thing has never been revealed, which kind of sucks because I really want to know what that was about. Shortly after that, Zephyrin, which is Clementine's brother, revealed that he, Clementine, his dad, a man and a woman, all were involved in killing the Anderson family. Police obviously went to go arrest the other people that he had listed. And so on August 20th, so we're skipping a couple months here, the killer had broken into, after he broke into the house, the wife, he attacked the wife first, but luckily for her, she fought back. And so the axe somehow ended up going into her foot, but it somehow only caused like a minor wound. As you would if an axe were to go through your foot, you obviously would scream, which obviously got the neighbor's attention, and they called the police. But obviously by then, I guess the killer, the person that attacked her, got away. And so on October 16th, Clementine had asked the court to basically look at her for like see if she was legally declared for trial, legally sane enough for trial, basically, and for court not to proceed until it was found whether or not she was sane or not. That ended up obviously backfiring on her, because apparently like 3 different people tested her and all 3 of them said she was legally sane. And so because she was declared legally sane, she got life in prison instead of being hanged. Because remember back then, if you killed somebody and it was confirmed you killed them, you got hanged because of how young she was. Because remember, she's only like 17, somehow. She was 17 when the murders happened, but apparently when she was finally sentenced, she was like closer to 19. On November 22nd, so we're taking another couple month gap here, in Philadelphia, Mississippi. So we're going up here. We're not in Louisiana or Texas. We're in Mississippi now, somehow. The bodies of William, his wife, and his 2 children would be found. Sorry, it's only one child. He had a 4-year-old. So yeah, William, his wife, and their 4-year-old child will be found. So, despite being all the way up in Mississippi, it was actually revealed that they actually once used to be members of the church, but shortly, left the church before they were murdered.
Coincidence? I think not!
And so, the brother, Zephyrin, and the father, Raymond, they both were released from prison, I guess, because it was found I guess they weren't that involved. I don't know what the situation was, but they both were released from prison, and they were never heard from again. Clementine apparently tried to escape back in 1913, but was obviously caught soon after. She apparently had a procedure done on her, which I thought was like a lobotomy or something, but apparently that wasn't like started to be done in the U.S. till like almost a whole decade later. So apparently it's not a lobotomy. Apparently it was something else, and apparently that made her like a model citizen, if you don't count the one time she tried to escape. And so she only served 10 years for all the murders it's believed that she committed. And so she was released in 1923, and to this day, she has never been heard from ever again.
Oh, hell no!
So if that's not crazy enough, apparently in 1985, which a lot of people don't talk about this part, which I think to me it's interesting because this really could have been her. Apparently, there was a woman who went to go see her 103-year-old grandmother for, I don't know if it was her birthday or the grandma's birthday, but she went to go see her because it was somebody's birthday. And then she told her the story about Clementine and like the whole axe killings and all that stuff, like I just told you about, right? And so, unfortunately, this older woman does end up dying later on, I assume of natural causes, because again, she's 103. And so, the woman finds, who for some reason is unnamed for some reason, she finds a picture of what's supposed to be allegedly her grandma when she was younger. And apparently, this woman and Clementine Barnabet were twins, but I could not find a picture of what they basically were like the mirror image of each other, but I could not find what the grandma looks like when she was younger. So yeah, that was a classic of Clementine Barnabet and the axe killings of the early 1900s in Louisiana. And so yeah, that's all I have for today, and I will see you guys for my next case. Bye.